Gig Gab, episode 448 for Monday, September 23rd, National Great American Pot Pie Day, 2024. Greetings, folks, and welcome to Gig Gab, the show by, for, and about working musicians. Here, as usual, in Durham, New Hampshire, I am Dave Hamilton, and today, my guest co-host is a longtime friend, former, I think, editor of Creem. I think I have that right.
Yeah.
Worked in the agency world for a long time. Fantastic guitar player, singer, harmonizer, songwriter. Dusty Wright, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Dave, I'm honored to be here at show 448. Let's look at the numbers. 4 plus 4 is 8. 8 plus 8 is 16. 1 plus 6 is 7. Lucky 7.
I love it. Dude, I love that you're a number nerd like me. This is great.
Oh, man. I love it. That's the first thing I looked at. Now, you really hooked me when you said it's National Pot Pie Day. So as a kid, this is going to be my earliest music memory. And I'm almost certain that I was eating a pot pie when this happened on the old trays, right? The old metal trays. The Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. And that's the beginning of my music path. That's the moment where you just get hooked and you're like, okay, what is this? And there's many tangents we could take from there, but the pot pie, you've the nourishment of the pot pie, the love of the pot pie.
Yeah, man. And
the Beatles, and we launch our generation, which I like to call, I don't like the boomer. I use tweener, which I wrote an essay about last week, or the tweener generation. Some people call us the Generation Jones because it's the second tier of the boomers.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Yeah. And I argue, we grew up with punk rock too. So we weren't just, classic Renaissance period of music, late 60s, early 70s. We had punk rock, 77, 78, Talking Heads, The Clash, Sex Pistols, The Damned, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which just keeps piling on as you're trying to hone your craft as a musician.
It's true. Our influences, it doesn't matter how old we get. Like those early influences define us. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, as they should. And it turns out it all started with the Great American Pot Pie. I love that.
On National Pot Pie Day.
Our National Great American Pot Pie Day.
I hope I can find a place in town today that has a pot pie on the menu.
It's the season.
I'll be very disappointed. It is exactly. It's a beautiful fall day. We're almost into fall. A couple more days, then we're
more. I think by the time this episode comes out, it will be fall. We're recording this a few days before, right? So the autumn. The autumn is living in New England, it's my favorite season.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah. All right, but so let's dig into this Creem thing, because as you were talking about your influences, it was very clear you were getting into like waxing poetic mode. So let's tug on that. You and I've never really talked about this. I know this about you, but every time we've gotten together, we've either talked podcasts, which is how we met years ago, or just music in general. But you're talk about your time with Creem, like that. That's. I'm always, we talk about working musicians here. There are lots of ways to take our musicianness and parlay that into a living, and being, involved in the music press is one of those. And for those of you who don't know, kids, ask your parents. Creem was like the epitome of the music press, or at least the alternative music press.
It was the alternative. It was the bastard son of the music press. It was all the things that you weren't allowed to talk about. Like, Rolling Stone never had Kiss on the cover, right? For whatever reasons, Jan wasn't a Kiss fan, yet they were hugely popular and influential for a lot of bands, for a lot of musicians. Rush prog rock in general, I think Rolling Stones stayed away from, unless they became hugely popular and more radio friendly, like Genesis did later in their career when Phil Collins took over the vocals. And I'm hard pressed to remember if Peter Gabriel was ever on the cover of Rolling Stone. He must have been during the MTV years. But, Creem always featured artists like that, as well as Lou Reed, some of the bad boys. You had Lester Bangs was writing for Creem. Creem was started in Detroit, Michigan. So, you had a real Midwest sensibility. You would have had Grand Funk Railroad on the cover. That they're not going to be on the cover of Rolling Stone, although Cameron Crowe's movie is based on him interviewing Grand Funk when he was a minor. So
I mean, that's the whole almost famous thing. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But I was always afraid to be in a band. I didn't feel like I was worthy. I didn't grow up in a household that appreciated art. I was also an artist as a youngster, a painter, an illustrator. I was into comic book art, all of those things that kind of shaped your influence, or my influence anyway. And it wasn't until I had to leave Ohio, and I grew up in an era where Devo was renting from my father a warehouse, practicing, and they're very early days. We're talking 76, 77, right around the time their first album would have been coming out. Yep. And there was a whole scene. The Waitresses were from my hometown of Akron, Ohio. All of these bands, and a lot of friends were moving to New York, and I was getting ready to go to law school, if you can believe that, and working in the family business. So I always had this left brain, right brain confluence, or maybe wrestled with both sides. Don't quit your day job was always in the back of my head with my dad. So I had a work ethic of like, okay, my first job, as we had talked about off air, I worked at William Morris. I was in the train. I got a gig in New York through a family friend. I'm working in the mailroom at William Morris. That lasts.
Okay, wait. You can gloss over that now, but we're going to come back to that. So, all right. Okay.
But I ultimately, when I got transferred to LA, I didn't like LA. I didn't like driving. I loved the music scene of LA, and I think the tug of the music was getting stronger and stronger. Like I got to start a band. I got to get back to New York, start a band. I feel like I'm ready now, and I got to support myself. So I love music. I've always loved music. My little brother and I used to put on shows in the garage where we would mime to music with our little scrim and a record player set up behind us, pantomime to music, playing the different instruments, which we couldn't really play, even though I was taking guitar lessons from the local fellow up the street who was trying to teach me how to play classical music. And I just didn't have the aptitude or the bandwidth. Once you see,
not and the desire too. I mean, classical music. I think it's almost objectively true that learning classical music will help you, at the very least, understand any other style of music, but also help you with your chops and your technique and all of those things. But when you're starting out, you need a desire to play the instrument for the joy of it, and then get to a point where you understand that, wait, time equals proficiency, right? And once you grok that, then it's like, all right, let me experiment with these other things that may not bring me, that I don't have an interest in. I don't want to say that studying classical wouldn't bring you joy, but it's a different kind of joy than that initial sort of drive. You just got to follow your drive. If your initial drive is classical, if you love classical music, then by all means, let that be the first thing. But otherwise,
well, of course, but it also, I think, David, I think you're shaped by your environment. My parents weren't listening to classical music. They were listening to Wes Montgomery and Frank Sinatra. And, it was me that said, no, wait a minute, there's other music. Jazz is cool. Yeah. And if I have one regret is that I didn't study jazz in college, because I am a huge jazz fanatic and I go see live jazz any chance I can get. But once the Beatles hit and that era of garage rock and popular music became, rock became it became our generation's music.
Yeah,
it was, all bets were off, and and you're learning how. And I'm playing on a crappy guitar because a lot of kids, your parents get you a guitar, they don't think about intonation and action on a guitar. In your fingers, you're 10 years old, you can barely, you can't make a bar chord. on a guitar
Right.
with the action, an inch and a half off the fretboard. It's
Yeah,
impossible.
but you don't know what you don't know either,
Exactly.
right? Like,
you don't know any of those things. Yeah.
Until you play a guitar. I remember learning on. I'm a terrible guitar player. Let's just get that right out of the gate. But as I picked up the first guitar that was ever put in my hands, like the action, and for those of you who aren't guitar players, the action is the string, the height of the strings off the fretboard. The action was like a half inch or something, and it's it was like, well, this is awful. But you just push through, or you don't push through, but one or the other happens.
You throw it down and you learn the drums, man. Like you did.
Like I did. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe not the flugelhorn or the trumpet, but maybe so. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But I think so. Having grown up in a working middle-class Italian-American family, you have work. You do work. Even if you're selling New York Times subscriptions, which I did at one point. When I left the agency, you have to make a living. And I thought, what? I'd rather be a writer. I think, even though, as we know, it's feast or famine. And that's when I started getting into journalism, because I was always a pretty good writer. And I thought that I had something interesting to share when critiquing other people's culture or music. So I focused on music primarily. And there were some local New York City magazines that would hire freelance writers and give younger writers a chance. Now, I was in my mid-20s then, so it wasn't like I was 17 or 18.
Sure.
And I think I had a more worldly view, having worked at William Morris and had been around and had been exposed to some incredible music. So I got hired by a magazine in the East Village called Cover Magazine.
Okay.
And the editor was, he was like an old hippie, but he was, he's like, sure, man, whatever you want to, whomever you'd like to interview. And I'm looking at like Nick Cave and Lloyd Cole and Tori Amos, Lucinda Williams. I'm looking at all these artists that are my peers, basically. And I'm like, wow, I really like their music. And that got me into the writing thing. And then another colleague of mine was starting a new magazine called the New York Review of Records, which launched the career of a lot of writers in New York.
Okay.
Some of whom I'm still friends with, and some of whom I ended up hiring at Creem. And this is at the apex of the music industry with the CD industry, where they would send you on press junkets to go see bands anywhere in the world for any kind of coverage, because, the U.S. didn't have the music culture and the music magazines that the U.K. did. When you think of the great music magazines of the UK of the era, you think of Melody Maker and New Music Express, also known as NME.
NME these days, or the Oasis news of the day.
Exactly. And then you got into the glossy magazines like Uncut and Mojo and Arena and Face, and they had all these beautiful culture magazines that looked like rock and roll magazines off the Vogue newsstand. And the photos were stunning. Well, there was an opportunity that existed with the upstart of Creem. Creem had kind of hit rock bottom. Okay. There was a fight to understand who actually owned the name, and lo and behold, a fella out of New York, or California rather, was able to get the name of the magazine and launch it as a UK equivalent, American equivalent to the UK glossier magazines. Larger format, better paper, some fashionable photo shoots, because the early 80s, late 80s rather, early 90s, labels would help support your magazine any way they could.
Oh, that makes of course.
Yeah, we're in the middle of the MTV era. They're selling CDs. I mean, the labels were dripping with cash.
Yeah,
dripping with cash, and they'd say, "Yeah, we'll help you with this." They would send bands into my office to audition for lunch and bring us lunch.
Wow. Yeah, of course. Okay,
for up and coming bands, and it was just like, I think back, I go, "Wow, I didn't realize it at the time how incredibly insane it was." I mean, I get a call one day, "Hey, Robert Plant is headlining Glastonbury. We want to fly you over to do a story. Are you interested?"
Okay,
Now,
so the labels were essentially underwriting the coverage. They weren't necessarily paying you, but they were ensuring that you had all the resources to cover what they wanted you to cover.
Exactly. You know, the
We
New York
see
Times.
that. I mean, I see that in the press world, not so much today, but 10
No,
years ago.
But
that was
when I
being
wrote for
thrown
the New
all
York Times, that was you're not allowed to take anything from anyone. You have to have a very objective view of what you're covering. You
Sure.
can't be, and influence peddling happens regardless if you say I could never be influenced by that. Come on, if they're flying me to cover Robert Plant at Glastonbury, and the Velvet Underground is playing that day, Midnight Oil's playing that day, the Black Crowes are playing that day, and oh, by the way, Plant's going to headline that night, and I'm walking around backstage, and Plant's introducing me to all the bands. I mean, come on.
Yeah. That's definitely an influence.
That's influencing.
I mean,
how can I write a bad story?
You're telling this story at least a decade later.
Exactly. Telling the truth,
Well, but that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the key here. It's really interesting.
But the story is Robert Plant's the nicest rock and roller I've ever met in my entire life. We're literally driving around Glastonbury. He's talking about the legend of King Arthur, his love for Tolkien, and how those lyrics infused his world of Led Zeppelin. Even though he didn't want to talk about Led Zeppelin, it was impossible not to. He was in his own right making it as a solo artist, more so than any of more so than Jimmy did, or any of them. I mean, obviously Bonham had passed on, but and I remember in the middle of the drive around, this is the legend of Tor, where the maidens walk around backwards on full moon night so they may be impregnated and have children, And then in the next breath, he's like, Mark, are you a fan of Moby Grape? I said, yeah, I don't know that much about him, but I love him. He goes, shall we call Jerry Miller? He's one of my favorite guitarists. And he pulls out the big giant cell phone and he calls Jerry Miller. Wow. And he goes, Jerry, you're not here. Oh, it's too bad. I'm with this chap from America, Creem magazine. They fancy you and they want to do a story on you. I'm like, right, Robert's putting me on the spot.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just love, and we left a message. He wasn't there. We left a message on his answer.
Sure.
It was classic. Yeah. I mean, like that's a story. Like you look back, you go, come on, that really happened. Yeah, it really happened. And other stories like that while I was at Creem. So writing for Creem was fantastic. And then it led me to work with Prince, who was then called the artist formerly known as. So a month or two after this interview with Robert Plant, I get a call from Warner Brothers. Hey, we're offering interviews with Prince, but you can't bring a tape recorder. You can't bring a pad or a pencil or pen. They have all these caveats about what you can't do. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm a music fan first. I get to meet Prince. I can figure out something, right? You'll
remember enough to write the gist of it.
Exactly. Well, we want to fly you to Minneapolis, to Paisley Park. He's going to play his new album, 7. And I'm like, how many people are going? Just you. I'm like, just me? Okay, fine. Sign me up. They fly me to Chanhassen, which is this wealthy suburb outside of Minneapolis. And I'm allowed to interview anyone else in his entourage that they had set up interviews. Michael Bland, his drummer, the costume designers. It's a soundstage, basically, for those who've never been there. It's a Hollywood soundstage in Chanhassen, which is near Redken Hair Care Products manufacturing facility and one of the best PGA golf courses, I was told. And I'm rolling around interviewing everyone. At the time he was with Maite, but she hadn't been through her media training, so she was off limits. But I could talk to anyone else who was at Paisley Park, which I did. And in the anointed hour, I was led upstairs to his master office. And as you would imagine with Prince, it was covered with stained glass. The doors were stained glass with purple doves and white clouds. Double doors, and I'm just waiting for the dry ice to billow out. I'm conjuring up what's Prince going to look like? Is he in his basketball sweats? Because I'd heard that he loves shooting hoops when he's not making music, and they have and I'm thinking like, Yeah, I used to play basketball in high school. Let's throw it down. Let's play one-on-one. Let's play horse or something with Prince. Wow. That would be my story, right?
That's that horse with Prince.
Yeah.
Horse with
the artist
formerly
known as, right, the Ankh logo.
Yeah.
And everyone around the Paisley Park called him the boss. The boss will meet you now. And like, what should I call him? You can call him the boss. I'm like, okay, great. I thought Springsteen was the boss, so I'm confused now. Not
yeah,
really.
Right. Yeah.
So the doors open up, and in the back of this very long room, his main office, which has this giant glass wall of floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking a forest, is Prince sitting demurely behind his desk, completely made up like he's going to go on stage.
Okay. Despite the fact that you don't have cameras or anything.
Exactly. So I'm like, I feel very impressed about this. He's dressed up for me. And, he's very shy, very demure. And he says, can I get you anything to eat? I said, no, thank you. I've been fed. I appreciate it. I would like to use the facility, the bathroom, if I may.
Yeah.
Sends me over to the bathroom, which is on the other side of the room. Go inside. And I look down, the first thing I see is makeup on the counter. Now, either he's done a touch-up or the makeup artist was in there.
Sure.
Or both.
Or both, yep.
And the first thing I look at is like, what kind of makeup does Prince use? Now, I can't use this in my story, I don't think, because he wants, that's the other caveat, that he had final approval on the story, which I'd never offered anyone. No journalist would do that.
Yeah, you don't do that.
How could I write an unbiased report of what happened to me if you're going to have final say?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, oh man, he must use Clinique or something, some high-end Hollywood stuff. It was Max Factor. And I loved it. It was so Midwestern. It was so Midwestern. I'm like, yes, good for you, man. You haven't fallen victim to the vanities of the cosmetic industry yet.
I love it.
Yeah. So suffice it to say, we play the whole album. We sit on the couch. He's sitting right next to me on the couch, and I'm trying to engage him in banter about like what's your responsibility with hip hop and stuff, because I think he was also at that time period. Larry Graham had kind of taken him under his wing, and he was getting into Jehovah's Witness program. Is really getting into his spirituality and kind of pushing aside his sexuality, which had been such a huge persona for him.
Huge part of his persona. Yeah, right.
And I was trying to engage him on those things, like, how do you look at hip hop? How do you look at gangster rap was just starting to happen? Is this responsible music for culture? And, he kind of deflected most of it and played the whole album, lasted about an hour. I was probably with him for about 90 minutes or so.
Wow. So
at the end of everything, and he goes, what'd you think of the album? I said, well, it's a lot to take in. There's a lot of material here, but it was really interesting. I think it's some of your strongest music since leaving that other label, you know? And I felt that way. And I said, so what are we going to do tonight? We're going to hang out. And with that, he gets up and walks out of the room. And I think, oh my God, like they're going to cancel this interview. I'm not going to be able to use anything.
Yeah, right.
And then like 5 minutes later, I'm just sitting there thinking, I'm laughing to myself going, regardless, I've got a great story to tell my friends back in New York and my buddies in Ohio where I grew up.
Yeah.
His manager comes in, who was married to Michael Bland. Valerie Bland was kind of his gal Friday, his day-to-day contact.
Okay.
That is not his official manager. And she said, Prince really enjoyed him. The boss really enjoyed himself with you today. And he'd love to offer you the opportunity to visit his club. First Avenue, right? The limo will take you there. And Michael, my husband's band, he's got a metal indie trio that's playing tonight. And I said, well, will the boss be there? Will he sit in tonight? She goes, well, I don't know. So yeah, of course I'd love to go. So I ended up hanging out that night with Michael Bland and his trio, which was really interesting.
Wow.
Because that didn't get a lot of press back in the day. And then I get back to Creem and I decide I'm going to make this like the story of Alice through the looking glass. This whole voyage into this magical world of Paisley Park and meeting all the characters, and this person's like the Cheshire Cat and this person's like, and then finally, this big reveal right at the end and playing the music and commenting on the music. And they had provided all this beautiful artwork, Dave. Like we didn't have to, we weren't allowed to shoot any photos.
I was going to say,
micromanaged everything, right?
Yeah, right. So here's what the pictures will look like. Yeah.
And I said, this is what the story is. And I don't remember if I even sent them like a rough copy of it. I must have, because there were no notes and nothing. And they said, this is fine. 2 or 3 months later, I get a call from the manager. Prince loved you so much, he wants you to publish and edit his magazine, NPG, New Power Generation. I'm like, are you kidding me? I said, do I have to move? They said, no, you can do it from New York. Now, you'll love this because you're a geek like I am. Quark was the first software to set up magazines, right?
Yeah.
Newsprint, Quark. I said, wow, man, I get to use Quark now. You know, we're moving off of newsprint and everything. And I can use this new software with my Apple computer. This is going to be amazing. And so I get to use Quark. And I find a great art director in New York. I'm running the whole thing. I hire some of my writers from my managing editor, Steve Holche, who's an amazing artist in his own right in the avant-garde world. He's my managing editor. I bring in some of my writers, Alex Smith, who's a great writer, who's written for everyone, and some others. And we end up publishing this magazine for 2 years. Now, I don't want to eat up all this gig time stuff with this story because it goes a little bit further.
Sure.
But, you know,
it's fascinating, man.
It was just, you know, and all the while I'm working on my music. I guess that's the end around back, right?
Well,
so I'm working on my own music, but I'm ensconced in this other world with really creative people who are, you know, the top of their game. I mean, when you're interviewing Robert Plant and then working for Prince, you're like, okay, come on. You have to glean something from that. Like, well, maybe the song that I'm working on doesn't really meet the standards of these artists, right? So you're, you know, and I'm working on my music. And at the time I was able to get a publishing deal with BMG, which gave me a little money.
I want to talk about that. I like, and I have a question. We are going to circle back to your time with Creem. I have one final question, but I'll save that because I want to talk about I like getting into your music. I want to talk about what you're doing today and gigging in New York and all this stuff. I also want to tell everybody we're doing a promo swap with a podcast that I had not heard about, this show called 1001 Album Complaints, right? So bear with me on this. If you've ever wondered what your favorite bands talk about after the gig, right, on the long van rides between, say, Reno and Salt Lake, right? And do you miss having in-depth conversations about music with your closest friends, picking apart why some songs are good, why some miss the mark? And do you read every inch of the available liner notes and still shake your fist at the clouds, yelling for more, right? That's where 1001 Album Complaints comes in and is a great podcast. Every week, musicians and their close friends give irreverent but informed takes on a new classic album pulled randomly from the book 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. So give it 1,000 weeks, which is going to be about 20 years, I think, and you'll get through it all, right? The hosts do extensive research. They tell the stories behind all your favorite records. They help better understand the songs, the great ones and the terrible ones, right? How they were conceived and built from the ground up. It's always a deep dive. There's always a lot of laughs. They've done 175 episodes, and they've definitely already covered some of your favorites, and hopefully maybe went easy on them. But if they didn't, maybe that'll bring out a reaction. That's a good thing. So if you want to sound informed and funny when talking about music, check out 1001 Album Complaints right now. It's available everywhere you get your podcasts. And I love this. This is going to be added to my list of shows that I listen to on the way home from gigs. So this is good stuff. And I appreciate them doing the swap with us because they're gonna promote us to their audience too, which I love. So
I'm looking forward to it. I don't know them, so I will definitely.
I didn't either.
Yeah. They will be on my radar now, and I'm very opinionated guy. So if you want me on.
There you go.
We can tear apart stuff, man. Let's do it.
All right. So I do want to ask you, because you live in New York, and a lot of us have the ability to go play gigs where we get in our car and we drive to the club, and there's a parking lot at the club, and we can unload right into the door and set up and park our car. Often you can even see it through the window from the stage. And, there's that vibe of gigging that I would think most people do because they don't live in a very dense city like New York. So I'd like to hear, I know you do some gigs with your solo stuff, obviously. And so let's talk about the nitty gritty of that. Like I always say that the stories that are interesting in the green room but are super boring at cocktail parties are like what we're interested in here. So, what is a typical gig like?
Well, you know, it's interesting. It's changed as I've gotten older.
Okay.
In the early days, I got to play CBGBs, right? You're dragging your gear down there. You're dragging your drum set, your amps. There's no back line of CBGBs.
There was so they wouldn't how would
now there's a great sound man and a great PA and mics.
Okay,
but so I'm dragging down my heavy amp. I for a while I don't know why I was using a Roland JC Chorus. I mean, could you get anything heavier in the back of a cab? Not really.
So that's what it would be. Is somebody would a cab bring your drum set like to a gig?
Yeah. Absolutely, and you're coming from 4 different areas of Manhattan, or sometimes even Queens or Brooklyn, right?
Of course.
So this is before Uber and somebody having a van or something. So you're like, okay, let's set up. It's 7:30. We're going to get a sound check at 7:50. So if the drummer, and I tell you. I've let go artists and bandmates who were always late for gigs, knowing we had to set up and knowing the drums take the longest to set up.
Of course they do.
And then not getting a sound check because the drummer's still setting up his kit. And I feel bad. Can I help you set up the kit? No, because you don't know where anything goes, even though you do, right?
Teach me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So what happened with New York is I think the club owners saw how difficult it was. So some of the clubs started providing back lines, and most of those had kits, and most of those kits were mic'd. Now, a drummer usually would bring a snare in, maybe a hi-hat or something.
We call it the breakables. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So you bring in something that you're really comfortable with. And, sometimes the amps were crappy, and maybe you would drag along a small Fender Princeton amp or something. I still do that to this day. I have some boutique amps that are small and manageable. So if you show up at a gig and you just say, look, this is my sound, these are my pedals, this is what I like. There's my favorite venue currently in the city is a place in Harlem called The Shrine, owned by some African guys. And it's based on the shrine that Fela Kuti, that was his home turf. And it's got albums stapled all over the ceilings and the walls and everything. But they have they have a competent backline and a really good sound guy. And they may have 3 bands on a night. And, it may be my band and then an Afro fusion band after us and then a neo-funk band after them. It's a very eclectic billing sensibility like it was in the 60s when you could see Miles Davis open for the Allman Brothers or somebody, when Bill Graham had these great shows and you'd go like, well, that makes no sense, but it makes perfect sense, exposing people to music.
Yes.
So I think today, unless it's like a private gig, where I have to drag down stuff and we have to drag in a PA and stuff, or rent a PA or have them rent a PA. I try to play gigs, particularly if you're woodshedding new material, where there's a back line.
Got it.
It's one less thing to think about. And,
it makes a back line, depending on the circumstance, it certainly makes things more efficient.
Right.
As long as the back line is, like you said, at least competent, right? But even then, like sometimes it'll be like, well, we're playing 2 sets. Like if we're playing 1 set and there's 3 other bands, then obviously use the back line. Like you got to, but if it's like, we're playing the whole night, it's just us, it could go either way. It's like, let me bring my drums in. It'll be fine. And I don't mind getting there early enough to set them up and help move the other gear out of the way. And all that stuff. But,
No, absolutely. Like when we play the rodeo bar, we would do that, and the rodeo bar was the place for Americana roots rock artists. You would see Jimmy Dale Gilmore there, or Billy Joe Shaver, or, Robert Gordon, So you wanted your own sound because you would have the stage for the night.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with, if you have the stage for the night, you want your sound because you're playing, in theory, 24 songs. You're playing 2 sets, 10 to 12 songs a set, right?
Yep.
2 sets. You maybe eat in between or afterward. And, you really want to feel comfortable with your gear.
That's it. Exactly. Yeah.
And you want to, and you also,
possible.
You want to have your best foot forward. I mean, it's, if you're playing a big festival and there's a bunch of bands, then they may let you throw your amp up, right?
Yep.
if you're a guitarist. And again, with the drums, you get to augment that kit with whatever you have that you really need. You know, I like my snare so many inches deep. You know, I don't want a piccolo snare. You know, you want something that's booming. So
well,
I think
we've talked about this on the show. I always bring 2 snares to every club because you don't know, unless you've been in the room before, you don't know which snare is going to work. I bring a wood snare and a metal snare.
Nice.
And I, even visually, there are times where I think, oh, it's going to be the birch snare tonight. That's what's going to work in this room. And I hit it once and it's like, nope. Put the Black Beauty on and it's like, yep, that's the one. But you don't know. And I think it's good. I know that it's good as a band, as any kind of instrumentalist, to be aware of how your instrument sounds in the room, because in the clubs that most of us are playing, so much of it is not up to the front of house engineer, right? It's a blend of stage volume and whatever they do to reinforce that. And so you got to be aware, I think, and you got to listen.
It's funny. What I've learned over the years with guitars and amps is bring an amp stand, angle that amp so you can hear it. Now, even if it's mic'd, at least I have my stage volume at a level. Because most of the times you're not wearing in-ear monitors on smaller venues, right? Now I can hear
I wear them in every venue.
Drummers, okay, that's good. But in New York, I
was going to ask,
there's fewer and fewer venues. Let's be honest. The glory years of the clubs in New York where you could plug in and play, there's few and far between. And it's a shame. I mean, music, rock and roll is not the number one music in the world right now. Singer-songwriters and dance and hip hop, they've taken over, and that's cool. But if you're playing live music, typically if it's a singer-songwriter, it's probably acoustic driven. They're maybe using the monitor. They're plugged into the house.
That makes sense.
So it makes sense. But if I'm playing a gig and I know that like if I'm playing the Shrine and I'm going to bring my amp, I'm bringing my amp stand with me so I can angle the amp towards me. And I know what it's all about, and I can hear myself. And the band, more importantly, the drummer can hear it perfectly. The bass player can hear it perfectly. And the audience hears it better. They're not being assaulted by the sound, which is at your feet. I've always marveled at the guitarist is like, I got to turn up. I can't hear myself. Like, because
your ears are on the top of your body, not the bottom.
They're not at the bottom.
The dog even agrees with this.
My dog, who is very old, is jealous because she's not up here. Because I'm sitting up in my loft in my house upstate. And she is like, never like this, but she must sense that she's not on camera today.
She hears you talking and she wants to be involved. It's okay. So What's your dog's name?
I apologize to your audience. Nikki. She's
Nikki.
She's going to be 15, so she's still getting along pretty well. Yeah.
And what kind of dog is she? We might as well just have a little segment here.
Yeah, she's an English setter, and she's a little noisy. I don't know if I should go off camera real quick and just bring her up here and she'll mellow out.
You can bring her up here. That's fine. I'm going to tell the audience what I'm going to ask you about while you're not listening.
Hold on.
So when Dusty was talking about his time at Creem magazine, I was reminded of the Big Star story, right, where they flew a bunch of music journalists out and created a whole conference for them. The conference was the ruse. And so he's about to put his phones back on. So we'll ask him about that in a little bit. But I set the audience up for a question I'm going to ask you in a little bit.
A lot of pressure, Dave. A lot of pressure.
Well, that's okay.
So, the other thing that's happened with gigging is now that we have a place upstate, which we were fortunate enough to be able to afford, we have a smaller footprint in the city. There's venues like just this past weekend. The local food co-op that I belong to had asked me months ago, hey, do you want to play the annual food co-op board meeting? And I said, well, what does that even mean? We have, food and drinks after the meeting. Typically it's outside. You'd have to bring a PA, which I have. And I'm like, is this really the right venue?
Yeah.
I'm an introspective singer-songwriter now, are people going to appreciate? Now I can temper my set to include some covers that they're going to no, which I
Of
did.
course. Of course.
But, it's like, and they're paying me, and, they didn't really have to because I'm a member of the co-op.
Right.
But my guitarist came up from the city, and we played the gig, and some people sat and watched, and a lot of people left because they were sitting in the blazing sun this past weekend, which was glorious.
Yep.
And, they had been discussing the business, the annual business of the food co-op. So, hello?
Yeah.
We just had something go down.
Oh, I can still hear you. You're all good as far as I'm concerned, Dusty. Huh.
Dave?
Are you? Yes. Yes. Huh.
That was weird.
Now you're back.
Yeah, you went out. Could you hear me while I was off?
Yes, I could hear you, but it was clear there was something about the connection. But we're back, so you can resume. It's all good. We had the dog. We had technology. It's fine. People
It's
understand.
always a ghost in the machine. Come on, what gig ever goes perfect, Dave? This is apropos.
It's absolutely well, and that's the thing, right? And what do we say on the show all the time? You keep performing. You always be performing. Be aware that there's an audience there, no matter what.
Clams Casino will always be dialed up in a gig. I don't know. That's what we say with my band. Like, how many Clams Casino did you deal tonight? I'm like, well, we all do it with a live gig.
Yep.
So
it happens, but that's but that's the thing. That's when that little glitch just happened, I was like, well, I wonder if I'll cut this out of the show. It didn't last long enough for it to be worth cutting out, because it's worth us all remembering exactly what you said, that sometimes on a gig, something goes wrong and you got to figure it out. I mean, I also remind myself and my bandmates, my fellow performers, we're not actually saving lives up there, right? The show, the idea of the show must go on is a gloriously romantic idea, and I love embracing it. But we're not saving lives, right? So the show, the word must is a little bit incorrect.
Exactly.
Right? But it, as part of the performance, embracing that romantic notion that the show must go on, it binds you to your audience, especially when there's a glitch or like the beauty of live art. And it's part of why we do this podcast, quote unquote, live to tape, is because there are those things that are not planned, that are not scripted. And even if you play the same songs over and over again, there's going to be different little moments. And that's why I go see live music. One of the reasons I want that.
Unless it's Rush, and we know that everything is the same every gig, and it's amazing.
Dude, they were mostly on, but I remember it's one gig at Radio City Music Hall. In fact, they were playing, and I just have to ask you to forgive me because my memory of certain things is always like too precise. But they were playing a song, Earthshine, and it's got an odd time because it's Rush. Yep. I call it the middle eight because the Beatles called it that. Rush never limited it to just 8 bars, but they would often, if not always, put an instrumental section in the middle of their tunes, right? It might be underneath a guitar solo, but there was always more going on than just the band just sort of grooving underneath a guitar solo. And so it was that middle 8 section of Earthshine, and it was like, they know they don't know where they are. And
interesting. Wow.
Yeah. And they all kind of looked at each other. It was clear. I mean, this happens. These are difficult songs that they play.
Yeah.
Of course it happens, right? Like, you know, you can rehearse, but if somebody gets lost, and it was interesting because it was like, oh, wait, Geddy's the one who's lost, and he doesn't know that he's lost yet, right? And I can see Alex and Neil looking at him, and what was really smart is they just went with him, which is a great lesson. Figure out the guy who doesn't think the person who made a mistake often doesn't realize they made the mistake. Follow them, because that's going to be your easiest path out. Yeah. Right? Otherwise
absolutely.
you gotta convince them, no, dude, you're wrong. Come with us. If you already know he's wrong and you know where he is, just go. Just follow.
Go. Yeah.
Just
follow
go.
the leader. Got to follow the leader.
The leader who is lost.
You know,
follow the lost leader. Yeah.
You know, talking about the unpredictability of gigs, the last 3 years in a row, we've played this summer concert series. It's called the RCTA Summer Sunset Concert Series, right on the Hudson River at 97th Street, next to the red clay tennis courts. And they have a stage they set up, and it's beautiful. And the previous 2 years were rainouts. Once while we were in the middle of our first set, and we just saw it. The crowd saw it approach. We have our back to the river, the Hudson River, overlooking Jersey. The audience is sitting on a hill, 300 people, and people just said, "Turn around." And there's just storm clouds rolling up, like a Wagner opera. Done, Ride of the Valkyries, dun, da, 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 and the heavens just open up, and we're rushing to get our gear because they didn't have a covering for the band. Nobody thought it was going to rain that night.
Yeah, sure.
Last year, they said, well, it's going to rain, but it's going to rain earlier. So when you guys start to play, everything, and it's just going to be sprinkles. And again, they didn't have a cover. I said, guys, you got to go to Home Depot and buy some stage gear. You know, like, this is insane. And it was a light drizzle, but we couldn't play because we'd get electrocuted.
I was just going to say, you get electrocuted.
Yeah, and I kept saying, guys, where? So this year, they bought the cover, but they couldn't find it. And I said, guys, I'm not going on stage till you find the cover. And I said, look at the last 2 years. I don't know what it is. I'm consulting with the Farmer's Almanac. Look, we still get paid to play.
Sure.
You'd like to play
you want to play the gig. Yeah, exactly.
This year, no problem. No rain, but we had the cover. So the cover kept the rain away, which was great.
That's awesome.
And then it started raining when I dropped my drummer off because I had to pick him up down to the East Village.
Okay.
And he had brought a lot of gear with him.
Sure.
And I goes, well, the timing's perfect. We're just getting you into your apartment, and the rain is there. It's now raining. So,
that's perfect. Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
So, but that again, the unpredictability of it, and safety for the musician.
That is important. Yes, yes. If you don't already know, playing a non-wireless guitar in the rain is inadvisable unless electrocution is part of the show. But please don't make that part of your show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you're singing while you're plugged in now. Not a good thing.
Oh yeah, you could create the loop right with the vocal mic there. Yeah, it's bad. So I want to. There's two things we're going to do before we wrap, and maybe more than two, but because I have to ask you the question that I told the audience I would ask you. But first, I want to ask about your latest record. This record you just put out called "Dust It Off."
Yes, some of my favorite cover songs. It's my 11th album, which is hard to believe. I had enough material to do a 12th album, but every album that I've been doing as of late, I would take covers that I liked and covers that we cover when we're playing live and doing gigs. And these are songs that informed me as a youth by some of my favorite singer-songwriters, as well as just oddities like Little Black Egg, which was the first guitar lick I learned.
Okay.
And it's on Lenny Kravitz's Nuggets album, which is by this band called the gosh, I'm drawing a blank now. The Nightcrawlers. So it was a regional hit in Florida and Chicago and Cleveland, the Northeast Ohio.
Okay.
It wasn't really known in New York City or other places, but it's one of these songs. The Ramones had covered it. The Cars did a version of it. And I thought, well, you know what? We should do a version. It hasn't been heard in a while. And it's a song that I like. And, it's the first song on. Oh, there you go. It's the first song on it. But, you look at the songs. And the other thing I like to do with songs is deconstruct them and make them my own voice, my own. These are not rote covers like Rundgren did so magnificently on his album, Faithful, right?
Sure.
And it's like, wow, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that from an artist that can play it so faithfully and maybe use the same mics and guitars and everything else.
Sure.
But for me, these songs were songs like, I love Warren Zevon, so I did Carmelita. Now, Dwight Yoakam has done a spectacular version of that. Willie DeVille did another version. Mine's completely different. I did I'm Not Your Stepping Stone. Paul
I
Revere
love
and the
your
Raiders.
version of that. Yes.
Yeah, it's very eclectic and weird. And, I have some friends that are, I don't really get this, and that's fine. That's fine. this album really pleased my sensibilities, Dave. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's the point.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the point you decided to use for this album. I don't mean that has to be the point of every record, but it's great when when an artist does that. And like I said, I love the whole thing. Your version of Stepping Stone was like, oh yeah, okay.
It's really whacked. Yeah, and it's very dark. It's dark around the edges. It's a little slow, but I was feeling very maudlin when I made the record. We were coming out of COVID. People were still trying to find their way. These were songs I had started during the COVID era. I just built my home studio up here in the Hudson Valley in Chatham, East Chatham, New York. And, this is how I felt. These are the songs that were speaking to me, No,
I think it's great because Stepping Stone, the original version that we all know, it's like upbeat. It's got nice little harmonies and everything. The message in the song is not happy and upbeat.
Very cynical. Like, this woman is not cool. She's, she actually the perfect song for today's social media influencers.
Wow.
What are you really sharing with the world other than, hey, look at this cute outfit I have on, or look at this product that I'm supporting. It's really, I think it's a timeless song in that sense. And when I was thinking about that, when I'm like, hey, you're trying to make your mark on society, right? That's a lyric from the song. You're using all those tricks that you used on me. You've been reading all those high fashion magazines. Girl, the clothes you're wearing are causing public scenes, but I'm not your stepping stone.
Yeah. I like it, man.
Yeah. So, and I think it speaks to me as you look as an older artist, you look at music differently. And I still love playing the Clash at full volume, or I love playing, A Lamb Lies Down on Broadway by Genesis and cranking it. But I also like Father John Misty. I think he's incredible. Yep. I like Bon Iver. I like Boy Genius. I think there's really great music out there.
I think that's a really good lesson to shine a light on and reiterate here, is that it's not just okay, but it's good to at least listen to everything. Find the things that you like. I mean, what resonates with you is what resonates with you. But if something resonates with you and it's not part of this, canon of songs or music that you have this definition of, if you like it, you like it. And it's okay to go and play it. Like, I mean, I've been playing, and I still play in Bitter Pill, which is the original band that I'm in, and we're like haunted rhythm and bluegrass, and it's a really fun band. I love it. But I needed another band. Like, the cover bands that I was in sort of fell apart, and I was like, I need something else. And so I wound up joining this band, and that plays 80s hair metal, and we're playing Poison and nice. Rat and Motley Crue, but also like the Proclaimers is in there, and the Outfield and things like that, right? But it's nothing like what I play in Bitter Pill. It's nothing like what I play in. I have an acoustic trio. It's like, guitars and harmonies and things like that. And like, it's nothing like that music, but I love it all. I chose the band not because of the music, but because the band had their stuff together. They could play their instruments, they could sing, and I could see an opportunity there. Right. Yeah. And it was like, I know these songs. Like, actually, a lot of them I didn't know because I've never been in a band with somebody that can sing a lot of these songs. So I actually had to learn, even though I knew the song, I had to learn these songs,
Sure. Yeah.
But it's like, I've never done those songs before, at least not in any serious way. But that didn't stop me from joining the band. It was like, this sounds like a great opportunity. It's going to be fun. And what I didn't realize was they never, like, these gigs that we play with that kind of music, they never tell me to play quieter, which is a fun little thing. Like, I'd gotten so used to managing my volume, and I still do with this band. I mean, there's no reason to overdo it.
Yeah.
But if I want to rock out a little bit on a tune, it's like, no, they even tell me, they're like, you're like, you're not as loud as, like, not even half as loud as our original drummer in the band. They're like, so this means we can actually play some clubs that threw us out because he was too loud.
Well, yeah, it means you're also a good listener because you're hearing the music, and good musicians listen to each other. So
Big
you can
ears,
play.
I say.
That's right, man. You can play at that volume because you appreciate the music you're playing, and I'm sure you're playing the appropriate volume for the band that you're in.
I try to. Sometimes I get it wrong. I'm not perfect, but I try. That is at least my goal. Yes.
Yeah, if you're playing a gig and the crowd they're just jam. It's funny, in our band, our guitarists were always like, "Hey, turn it up, John. Nobody can hear you." And he's very shy, and he's played with Roseanne Cash. Joe Walsh is his best friend. He's played with Stephen Stills. He's an incredible guitarist, but he's a very subtle, ethereal guitarist like Mark Rebo or Nels Cline. He's that kind of heady guitarist. And so, like, they're really interesting parts.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to turn it up a little bit. He's not going to step out in your face and
Right.
like some guitarists are really into the performance aspect of playing. It's more about what is he playing that's so interesting and how it complements my music, because I don't consider myself a great guitar player. I like leaving space in the music and using chords that afford a lot of space and suspended chords, which I like. And so creating that texture and creating that interplay with each other, it's very important.
Yeah, and it's not
listening, as we're just discussing, listening to each other.
It's not
signal just went.
Oh, Dusty's signal went out again. Interesting. I think he might be back. I don't know. Maybe the Wi-Fi in his loft. Maybe his dog is using the Wi-Fi to contact other dogs.
Yeah.
I think your dog was using the Wi-Fi to contact other dogs, but
there's no other Wi-Fi on here, and I'm in a house with a dedicated line. So it's very it could be, every time a tree falls, something goes out around here. So
there you go.
They may be working on the lines, actually, which they always are. And you have to have a generator, as you know.
But what we were saying is, it's not just about the volume at which you play. You saying that you leave space. It's important to blend with your bandmates, just like it's important to blend with your fellow singers if you're singing harmonies. And it takes big ears. You got to listen. Yeah.
You got to listen, and I really appreciate bands that get that. And look, I said earlier, I love jazz, and for sure that's what jazz musicians do. I mean,
you can't not. That's right.
And as Miles Davis once said, you only need to play that one note to get everyone's attention, right? It can be one note.
It's true.
It can be one drum hit, right? One drop on that tom, right? Or that hi-hat, and people are like, "What? What's that?" Just well placed.
Just well placed. I love I am reminded, as you're telling the story, of the drum solo that Joe Morello did on the studio version of Dave Brubeck's Take 5, right? Where, the piano's doing the comping in 5/4, Buddha, Buddha, right? And the drum solo starts out with ba-da-da-da, boom.
Yeah.
And it's like
goosebumps, man. I just got goosebumps thinking about it.
Then he does it again.
Yeah.
And of course he evolves the solo and he weaves a beautiful little thing. But I mean, like, he doesn't start by going, "All right, let me show you every trick I have." Woo! It's like, nope. Yeah. All right, I have one last question to ask you, and this I've already set this up, but and this might be a complete flop because I have no idea. But I think you were at Creem around the time that Big Star was trying to become Big Star, and they held this conference. Their manager had this idea of holding a conference for all the music industry press, and Big Star was playing at the event at the conference. And the whole conference itself was like a ruse or a setup to get people to learn about Big Star, and they loved Big Star. But it also became this weekend of debauchery, and the entire music press decided not to talk about anything that happened that weekend, including Big Star, and it really screwed them.
Well, that would have been before. No, I wasn't at Creem. Was that
before your time? You weren't at Creem then.
No. My big claim to fame at Creem, besides having the plant and the Prince story, was giving Pearl Jam their first cover.
Whoa!
And here's the cool thing about it: they didn't do Rolling Stones cover because they said, "We've already done Creem's cover." And I think they were aware of that kind of bastard son Creem, and this is what we read as kids. And Rolling Stone was too glossy by then. So this is the early '90s, right? And I'll never forget the coolest thing about that, besides hanging out with those guys, and they're amazing, right? And they're still doing it, and they're still amazing, and their new record's amazing, right?
I agree.
Yeah. Is that I got a letter, which I have to find, it's in my effects, from Mike McCready's mother, typewritten, thanking me for putting the boys on the cover of this magazine, how much fun they had. And I thought, wow, that's a great parent acknowledging what their kids are working on and what they're trying to be. And, did we know they were going to be huge? Well, they were certainly different sounding, right?
Right.
They were different sounding than Soundgarden, whom I loved.
Sure.
The Screaming Trees, whom I loved. All that whole
Forgot about the Screaming Trees.
That whole Seattle
I
music
nearly
scene.
Lost them in my memory.
Oh my God, one of my favorite songs from that era.
Right. Yeah.
By the Screaming Trees. Mother Love Bone before that.
Yeah.
I got to see the Temple of the Dog show at the Garden the month or two before Chris Cornell left this mortal coil.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. Wow. By the way, they did some really obscure covers that show. Go look at the set list.
Okay.
Have your fans go look at the covers they did. They did a Bowie cover that I'm like, where did that come from? And I was just like, oh my God. And by the way, you're at the Garden, it's packed, and there's no scrim, there's no lights, there's no, lasers and stuff. It's just musicians communing with each other in a live gig, and the crowd just pulsing. And I'm thinking, and I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it right now. Like, they got to take this band on the road. They got to tour. They got to tour with this. And of course, it wasn't meant to be, unfortunately. It was a one-off.
Wow. Yeah, they played Jump Into the Fire, Harry Nilsson.
Exactly. Why?
I'm a
Where did
Mover.
That come? Yeah.
From Free, right? Quicksand from Bowie.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Achilles' Last Stand.
Yep.
And War Pigs.
Yeah.
And wait a minute. Also, talking about a band that is completely comfortable with whatever, if it moves you and you like it, it's okay. Also, Zeppelin, right? We talked about Zeppelin, Bowie, Black Sabbath, Fascination Street from The Cure. I love this. I love it.
It was the most amazing gig. The next week, I was lucky enough to see the Foo Fighters at the Garden, which was equally amazing.
Yeah,
but, look, I'm a music fan. I love music. Obviously, you can tell, your audience can tell. So I love even seeing music that I don't know anything about this person. And, I'm walking to a little venue and there's somebody plucking a banjo and singing something about their life. I mean, I love that. I think there's awesome. I think music brings joy to us, and we need more joy in our life anyway. We've had such a dark period, this divisiveness, political, socially, all these awkward things that are happening. Everyone wants to feel joy in their life, and they want to share joy. I think deep down inside, people want to share joy.
Live music is that thing.
It is that thing, man. You resonate at a frequency that is it's undeniable. Undeniable.
Yep.
Keep gigging, man. We got to keep gigging.
I agree. It's why my listeners know I went 5 months at the beginning of the year without quite realizing it, where I didn't play a single gig. And as I was loading my drums into my car after like the 5th month and realizing, wait a minute, what has just happened? I realized, and everybody's probably sick of this story, but I realized that a couple of the bands that I was in didn't survive COVID. Not that anyone passed away, but people, kind of were comfortable coming out of COVID at different times, and it just never happened. And that's when I was like, wait, I gotta find more gigs. And then August, I completely overdid it. And dude, there was one 38-hour period where I played 4 gigs with 4 different bands in 3 different states.
That's a lot.
It was a lot. It's fun to talk about now. It was fun to do, but like the day before it, I was like, well, okay, what have I done to myself? Like, this is like if there's any logistics issues, like car, weather, traffic, this isn't going to work. Yeah, like I've overpacked this thing. Like, but it did work. I thank whoever it is that pulls the strings for these things. Yep, I got lucky. But thank you for hanging out with us, my friend.
And I want to tell your audience, I'm working on a new side project with my bass player's wife, Dana Fuchs. You may
Okay.
know her. She played Janis Joplin off Broadway. Her
Yeah.
claim to fame, she was in the movie Across the Universe, the Beatle movie by Julie Taymor.
Right.
She was Sexy Sadie. She sits in with us often. She's a blues rock artist, internationally known. And, mutual admiration. She sits in with us when she has a chance. And so we're working on a new project. And it's going to be an interesting quartet. The four of us, with her playing percussion, me on acoustic, John, my guitarist, on his electric, and Kevin, her husband, who's also her bassist, on bass. And so I hope to get up to your neighborhood with this, because she has quite a following on the East Coast, more so than I do, because I kind of a homebody, even though I've got a bunch of solo gigs coming up here and around the Hudson Valley. But I think that's going to be, we're just going to call it Dusty and Dana. That's going to be the thing. I'll send you some stickers.
Okay.
You can put on your packages, your drum gig.
Yeah. Oh man, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it should be fun. And I can't wait, because again, I'm playing with a musician I really respect and admire. She's a great vocalist. And the times that she's sat in with us, it's always magical.
Oh,
you just go like,
you got to repeat that. Yep.
Yeah. And again, I think it comes down to this, when I see jazz, I go like, yeah, this is what music used to be like. This still is. I shouldn't say it isn't, because there's a bunch of young prog jam bands that I love. Goose, Dopapod. Do you know these bands?
I do, of course. Oh yeah,
they're fantastic. I love the John Mayers with Dead and Company. I think that's fun.
John Mayer, as I understand it, is the majority owner of Dead and Company.
Yep.
Like it's already happened. Like, people talk about passing the torch in the jam band community.
Yeah.
It's like the ownership. If the ownership is not the torch, I don't know what is. But I found that interesting. Like, why not let the new guy buy it and have it? Yeah.
And again, get out there and see live music. Go, you're not too old to see new music. We hit on that earlier. Go see a new band. Go see a band with your children that you may have no connection with. Go see some hip hop live. It's really exciting when you see it. Go see Taylor Swift if you can afford the tickets.
I would love to go see Taylor Swift. I was not able to afford to. My daughter, I don't. You and I didn't talk about this, but my daughter now lives in northern Italy, and she was able to get tickets and go see Taylor in Milan not that long ago.
That must have been magical.
It was magical. Yeah, it was for her. Yeah.
Yeah. With all my connections, I couldn't get tickets for my daughter that weren't like, breaking the bank. And I just thought, you know what? I'll give you the money and you can go see 10 bands this year.
Right.
Or 20 bands this year. Or if you want to go.
Yeah. Or more. Yeah.
Or more. Exactly.
Yeah.
But the point is go see music. There's nothing better than communing with your kids when you take them to see music.
I agree. We took our kids. It's still a thing that we share even from afar, and I'm going to get choked up here, and that's okay. But, when my daughter was at the Taylor Swift show, she was sending us like videos from it. She went, we also wound up seeing this tour, but she went and saw the Green Day tour in Italy before it got here.
Yeah.
And they were playing Dookie. And for whatever reason, our family, the four of us just loved, it's a stupid song, that song Pulling Teeth. And they rarely play it live, but because they were playing Dookie, they played it live. And so I'm definitely going to get choked up. My daughter sent us a video of, live essentially of them playing that song like during the show. And it was like,
that's
like
awesome.
What a great thing. Like here she is literally half a world away. And the connection of music is strong. And it's because we did exactly what you're saying. Like go with your kids. I went with our kids to see Hannah Montana and the Miley Cyrus and the Jonas Brothers. Talk about getting choked up. I expected nothing when we went to see Miley Cyrus the first time. Jonas Brothers opened up for them. We didn't know about this band. They were freaking amazing.
Yeah.
Miley ended the show with her on an acoustic guitar, white t-shirt, jeans, barefoot, sitting at the end of the catwalk, which was basically the center of whatever arena we were sitting in. And she just sang a song. My daughter was sitting in my lap, and I like burst into tears. It was this song about her grandfather who had passed.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, now I understand. This woman is a star. Like, if she can own a room like that, holy cow. But I never would have gotten to have that moment if I didn't do exactly what you just said. Go see music with your kids that they want to see. We also dragged our kids to see McCartney and the Rolling Stones and things like that, which is also great. But
Yeah.
Let it go both ways. Yep. For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let it go. This has been amazing. Dave.
Thanks.
You. Yeah.
Where can people find you, my friend?
Dusty Wright. That's with a W.com.
Right.
And, I'm on all the platforms, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Twitter, Instagram, etc. I might use the Puff Dusty handle here and there.
Oh, I forgot about the Puff Dusty handle. That's right.
Yeah. Which maybe I shouldn't be using right now.
Well, maybe not.
Because it was supposed to be a humorous look at the other Puff.
Yes.
But anyway, I digress.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed this, and I love telling stories. You couldn't get me to shut up, so
it's great. I do want you to say 3 more words, if you would. We always like to give this advice at the end of the episode, so if you'd be so kind, my friend, to take the honor.
Oh God, why am I
just
spacing?
look at the screen. Look at the screen. I've got it right there.
I can't remember. It's in huge letters. Always be performing. Always look at me. Always be performing. Always.
Thanks, folks.
I was just playing it up for your audience.
I appreciate that. No, that's great. Perfect. We'll see you next week.